A lot of very positive things going to come out of the relationship. So, Vladimir, thank you very much. Thank you.
Всем большое спасибо, я приветствую всех, я приветствую как...
И народы Америки ведь думали, что же это у них за президент, когда без его ведома летают самолеты, и, следовательно, без его ведома может начаться война, а американцам расплачиваться за начало этой войны своей кровью. Но это...
Crimea was an autonomous republic within the Ukrainian Republic, and there was a referendum held in the early 1990s. There was a series of very heavy politicking going on with a lot of Russian involvement, but ultimately the region remained part of Ukraine, and this formed a core part of the negotiations around the so-called Budapest Memorandum, in which Russia and a series of Western states, including the United States, agreed to recognize Ukraine's territorial boundaries as they were at the end of the Soviet Union, in exchange for Ukraine making certain commitments on a number of issues, but in particular on its own dismantlement of what remained of the Soviet nuclear program. Crimea sits at the northern end of the Black Sea and at the south of Ukraine. It plays a very strategic role in overseeing Black Sea maritime activity. One of the other parts of that agreement that we discussed earlier that came in the 1990s was that Russia leased the Black Sea naval base in Sevastopol on the southwestern side of Crimea, allowing it to continue to use those port facilities to project naval power through the Black Sea.
Надзвичайно складне питання в рамках реалізації угоди про Чорноморський флот Росії у базі Севастополь. Як зробити так, щоб Україна не була пасивно кимсь втягнута в військовий конфлікт з третьою стороною? Ми не маємо намір давати можливості для базування військових підрозділів, які можуть використовуватися для агресії, військових дій з третіми чи четвертими сторонами.
Russia annexed it in 2014 after organizing a sham referendum, taking advantage of essentially the brief collapse of the Ukrainian state in the aftermath of the Maidan revolution, which Russia very heavily opposed, seeking to keep in power the Yanukovych regime that was in office before then. Yanukovych even briefly fled to Crimea before going to the rest of Russia. Russia used its strategy of bringing in so-called little green men. Putin denied that they were involved in the operations there, and claimed that it was entirely an indigenous movement to call for unification with Russia. However, later admitted that this was entirely false, handed out medals for the operations in Crimea that have a beginning date on the 21st of February, right at the end, or at the apex of the Ukrainian Revolution in 2014. And many of the leadership of that military effort then went on to play key roles in the Russian-backed insurgency and invasion of the Donbass later in 2014, and even today in the full-scale invasion of Ukraine that's been going on for just over 3 years now.
Спасибо крымчанам и севастопольцам. Дорогие друзья, у нас сегодня очень радостный, светлый праздничный день. После тяжелого, длительного, изнурительного плавания Крым и Севастополь возвращаются в родную гавань.
Надо вообще полевую кухню, блины жарить, гармошку дать.
Were Trump to unilaterally recognize Crimea as Russian territory right now, he would be immediately giving up perhaps the most important negotiating card in all of these discussions, seemingly for nothing in return. Ukraine, of course, has insisted on full restoration of its pre-2014 boundaries, but there has been a lot of acknowledgement within Ukrainian political circles and even in the discussions that were held in 2022 about a ceasefire that Ukraine would at least no longer press its claim against Russia for the return of Crimea and allow that to sort of remain unsettled, but also to go unchallenged.
We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering. A durable peace for Ukraine must include robust security guarantees to ensure that the war will not begin again.
Today, for Ukraine in potential negotiations around the future where it seeks to claw back as much of its territory as possible, there's a broad recognition that there some kind of adjustment, at least on the rhetoric on Crimea, might be necessary to do that. But that is, of course, one of the most significant things that Ukraine can offer in those negotiations, whereas Putin is taking a maximalist position and demanding the annexation and incorporation into the Russian Federation of territory that his army has never even occupied.
I think we're doing very well with Russia, but right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine, and I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine, and they don't have the cards.
You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?